I stood behind the serving line at an elegant gala, invisible to the crowd of wealthy guests laughing and networking in the ballroom beyond. They saw a server. They saw someone beneath their notice. What they didn't see was that I held the keys to this entire estate, and my billionaire husband was about to walk through those doors to find me scrubbing the dishes they'd ordered me to clean. If you've ever been underestimated or dismissed because of appearances, this story will resonate deeply. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because what happens next will remind you that respect isn't about status. It's about character. Let's dive in. My name is Elena Hart, and 3 years ago, I married Liam Hart, the founder of Hart Innovations. Most people know him as the visionary behind one of the fastest-growing renewable energy companies in the country. He's the kind of man who appears on magazine covers and speaks at global conferences about sustainable technology and environmental impact. What they don't know is that beneath the polished exterior, Liam is one of the most grounded people you'll ever meet. Maybe that's why we connected so instantly when I was waitressing at a business lunch he attended. While his colleagues were snapping their fingers for service, he was the only one who looked me in the eye, asked my name, and actually meant thank you when he said it. Just another reminder that character shows up in the smallest moments. Liam never paraded his wealth, and neither did I. Even after we got married and moved into the Hart estate, I held on to the parts of myself that mattered. While he attended board meetings and investor dinners, I continued volunteering at community centers and working with families who reminded me of my own upbringing. Single parents working 2 jobs, kids who needed someone to believe in them. It was a purposeful life, and we both valued it that way. But tonight was different. Tonight was the annual Silvercrest Foundation Gala, and our mansion had been chosen as the venue. Liam had been planning this event for weeks. The proceeds would support sustainable housing projects for underserved communities, a cause close to both our hearts. He was genuinely passionate about making an impact, and I was proud of him for it. The irony wasn't lost on me, though. Hundreds of the city's wealthiest philanthropists would be gathering under our roof, and most of them wouldn't recognize me if I handed them champagne on a silver platter. Which is exactly when the idea hit me. Call it curiosity, call it a social experiment. But I wanted to see how these people, the ones who preached compassion at podiums and posted about charity online, actually treated the people serving them when they thought no one important was watching. So, I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to attend our own gala, but not as Liam's wife. I would go as one of the catering staff. I know it sounds reckless, maybe even petty, but think about it. How often do we get the chance to see people's true character unfiltered? I borrowed a black service uniform from our head caterer, pulled my hair into a sleek bun that made me look nothing like the woman in the photos beside Liam, and practiced my best neutral, unnoticeable expression. Liam was running late from a conference call across town, so he had no idea what I was planning. Perfect. I slipped through the service entrance just as the first guests began arriving, their laughter echoing off the marble floors, their jewelry catching the light from chandeliers I personally chosen. And just like that, I disappeared into the background of my own home, ready to discover exactly who these people were when the cameras weren't rolling. The service entrance buzzed with controlled chaos. Catering staff weaving through narrow corridors, trays balanced overhead, voices clipped and efficient. I pressed myself against the wall as a server rushed past with an elaborate charcuterie display, the scent of aged cheese and cured meats trailing behind her. First time, a woman with tired eyes and graying hair paused beside me, adjusting her apron. I nodded, suddenly aware of how authentic this had to feel. Nervous, I admitted. She smiled knowingly. Just keep your head down and your tray up. These people don't really see us anyway. She patted my shoulder and disappeared into the kitchen. These people. The phrase settled uncomfortably in my chest. I caught my reflection in the polished metal door of the industrial refrigerator. The woman staring back looked nothing like the Elena Hart who'd appeared in Architectural Digest last month, touring this very mansion with its designer. Gone was the styled hair, the confident posture, the casual elegance Liam always said I wore like a second skin. In their place, a stranger in a borrowed uniform, hair scraped back so tight it pulled at my temples, makeup-free face that could belong to anyone. Tonight, the lady of the house becomes invisible. I straightened my shoulders and pushed through the swinging doors into the grand foyer. The transformation was breathtaking, and I'd seen it happen. Over the past week, I'd watched our home metamorphose into something from a fairy tale. But seeing it now through the eyes of someone who supposedly didn't belong here, the opulence felt almost obscene. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors. A string quartet played Vivaldi near the sweeping staircase, the music floating up to the vaulted ceiling 3 stories above. The ice sculpture Liam had commissioned, the Silver Crest Foundation's emblem, dominated the center of the room, already beginning to weep in elegant rivulets onto its silver base. Guests flowed through the space like a river of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. I recognized faces from news broadcasts, society pages, corporate boardrooms. A senator laughed too loudly near the bar. A tech mogul whose company Liam had mentored checked his phone with obvious disinterest. A celebrity couple posed for a photographer, their smiles practiced and perfect. "Excuse me, champagne?" A woman materialized in front of me, her tone not quite a question. I'd been so absorbed in observing that I'd forgotten my prop. I quickly grabbed a tray from the service station and offered it to her. She plucked the flute without acknowledgement, her eyes already scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. The invisibility was immediate and absolute. I moved through the crowd, weaving between conversations about Mediterranean vacations and stock portfolios, art acquisitions and political donations. People reached for glasses without looking at my face. They shifted to let me pass without pausing their stories. I was furniture, a function, necessary but unremarkable. At first, it was almost amusing, like watching a play from backstage. I saw a man I recognized from Liam's business dinners bragging about a self-made fortune that I knew he'd inherited. I watched a woman who'd given a TED talk about empowering women dismiss a female server with a wave that suggested she was swatting a fly. But the amusement began to curdle as the night wore on. "Could you clean this up? Someone spilled." A guest gestured vaguely at the floor near his feet, not bothering to make eye contact. "The hors d'oeuvres are cold. Is the kitchen incompetent?" Another complained, loud enough for nearby staff to hear. I caught snatches of conversation that made my skin prickle. The help these days, no work ethic. I mean, how hard is it to keep glasses filled? She should be grateful she has a job at an event like this. Each comment was casual, thoughtless. That was what struck me most. Not malice, but complete indifference. We weren't even real enough to be cruel to intentionally. We were simply not there. I was refilling champagne glasses near the grand piano when I first saw her. Miranda Colburn swept to the ballroom like she owned it, which, given her position as vice president of the Silvercrest Foundation, she probably believed she did for the evening.
Silver gown, diamond earrings that could fund a small nonprofit for a year, and an expression of perpetual dissatisfaction. She paused near the entrance, surveying the room with the practiced eye of someone cataloging flaws. Her gaze swept by me without recognition. Of course it did. We'd been introduced at 2 previous foundation events, had discussed grant allocation for nearly an hour at one of them. Tonight, I was invisible. Miranda snapped her fingers at a passing server. The young man flinched but quickly approached. "The lighting near the election table is all wrong. Fix it. And tell the quartet to play something more upbeat. This isn't a funeral." "Yes, ma'am." He hurried away. I watched her scan the room again, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Something in my gut tightened, an instinct I'd learned to trust. This woman, I realized, was about to be a problem, but I wasn't ready for just how much of one.
The kitchen was a symphony of controlled violence. Steel clanged against steel, oven doors slammed, flames roared beneath copper pots, while chefs barked orders in culinary shorthand I barely understood. The air was thick with heat and urgency. Caramelized onions, seared duck, the sharp metallic scent of polished silver, awaiting its moment in the ballroom. I pressed myself against the wall as a line cook rushed past with a tray of beef Wellington, his face flushed and gleaming with sweat. No one looked at me. No one questioned my presence. The borrowed uniform was a passport into a world that existed parallel to mine, occupying the same physical space, but operating on entirely different frequencies. "Champagne station, now!" The head caterer's voice cut through the chaos. "Guests are arriving." I grabbed a tray and joined 3 other servers near the service doors. Through the narrow window, I watched the first wave of arrivals sweep into the foyer, a cascade of silk, diamonds, and inherited confidence. Then I saw her. Miranda Colburn commanded the entrance hall like a general surveying troops. Her silver gown caught the chandelier light, transforming her into something molten and untouchable. She moved through the space with purpose, her eyes cataloging every detail, every potential imperfection. "You," she pointed at a server arranging canapes. "Those are supposed to be on the far table, not here. Are you incapable of following simple instructions?" The young woman flushed and hurried to correct her mistake. Miranda didn't watch her go. She'd already moved on, her dissatisfaction a searchlight sweeping for the next target. I pushed through the service doors with my champagne tray, becoming part of the elegant machinery of the evening. The guests flowed in like a river of entitlement. I recognized many of them, people Liam and I had entertained, negotiated with, even called friends. But tonight, they wore their wealth differently. Without the social contract of equality, without needing to acknowledge me as human, their true textures emerged. "Champagne," I offered, approaching a cluster near the piano. A woman in emerald silk, Catherine Vale, the society columnist whose reviews could make or break a charity event, plucked a glass without breaking her conversation. So I told her the Hamptons house was simply unacceptable for August. Can you imagine? Only 4 bedrooms? Her companion laughed on cue. I turned to leave, but Catherine's voice stopped me. "Excuse me. You there." She didn't snap exactly. Her tone was worse, bored, mildly irritated, as if my existence was a minor administrative inconvenience. "You people should really anticipate needs better. I shouldn't have to ask for refreshments." Of course, my apologies. The words tasted like copper. I moved through the crowd, watching, always watching. Near the auction display, Ethan Ross held court, a charismatic politician whose campaign posters promised a voice for every citizen. His smile was brilliant, his handshake firm, his attention laser-focused on whoever could advance his career.
When the server accidentally brushed his elbow while passing, he stepped aside with a look of mild disgust, adjusting his cufflinks as if contaminated. To think, he said to his audience, that there are families in this city who can't afford basic necessities. It's why events like this matter so much. He raised his glass, and the circle echoed his toast, their champagne flutes catching the light. I wondered if any of them knew what basic necessities actually cost, or what it felt like to need them. Miranda's voice cut through my thoughts. This tray is crooked. She stood before me suddenly, her eyes cold in assessing. Does no one have standards anymore? I looked down. The tray was perfectly level. I'll adjust it immediately, I said evenly. See that you do. She turned away, already dismissing me from existence. The evening wore on. I circulated, refilled, cleared empty glasses, and absorbed the casual cruelty of people who'd forgotten or never learned that invisibility didn't equal non-existence. Then the head caterer appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face tight with stress. We have a problem, she announced to no one and everyone. Daniela called in sick or short-staffed for dinner service. Miranda materialized beside her as if summoned by the scent of complications. Short-staffed? Tonight? This is completely unacceptable. We'll manage, Miss Colburn. We always... You'll more than manage. You'll be perfect. Miranda's gaze swept the kitchen and landed on me. Something flickered in her eyes. Calculation, assessment. You there. Elena, was it? My heart stopped. Had she recognized me? Yes, ma'am. You're being moved to dish duty. We need the experienced servers on the floor. And frankly, you seem adequate at best. She gestured towards the industrial sinks, already piled with plates from the first course. I want every dish spotless. We're photographing the dessert service, and I won't have our reputation damaged by water spots or soap residue. The head caterer opened her mouth. Whether to protest or agree, I'd never know. Is there a problem? Miranda's voice dropped to ice. No, ma'am. Elena, you heard her. I stood there, champagne tray still in hand, looking at the mountain of dishes awaiting me. This wasn't observation anymore. This wasn't a social experiment with clear boundaries and an exit strategy. This was real. Miranda had just ordered me, in my own home, to wash dishes for her guests, and everyone was watching to see if I'd comply. I set down the tray and rolled up my sleeves. Right away, I said. The water was scalding, but I barely felt it. I was too busy calculating how deep into this performance I was willing to go, and what would happen when Liam arrived to find his wife elbow deep in soap suds, scrubbing plates for people who just toasted to helping the less fortunate. The breaking point, I realized, wasn't something that would happen to me. It was something I was walking toward with open eyes. The water was scalding, but I kept my hands submerged anyway. Pain was clarifying. Pain reminded me why I was doing this. Through the service window, I could see into the ballroom, a framed portrait of wealth and supposed compassion. The guests had moved from cocktail hour into the main event, their laughter growing louder, their movements looser. Champagne was doing its work, stripping away the thin veneer of civility they'd arrived wearing. Failed dreamers, every one of them, a voice boomed near the kitchen doors. I recognized him, Marcus Bellamy, a real estate developer whose donations to Silvercrest were always accompanied by press releases. He swayed slightly, his face flushed with expensive wine. That's what service staff are, really. People who couldn't make it, so they clean up after those of us who did. His companions laughed, the kind of laughter that needs witnesses to exist. I scrubbed harder, the steel wool rough against my palms. Did you see the one with the champagne tray earlier?
Catherine Vale's voice drifted from just beyond the doorway, pitched loud enough to carry. Clumsy hands, nearly spilled on Senator Morrison's wife. The brunette? Miranda's reply was crisp with disdain. I had to reassign her. Some people simply lack the grace for front-of-house work. My jaw tightened. The tray had been perfectly steady, but truth didn't matter here, only the performance of superiority. A crash echoed from the prep station. One of the dishwashers, a young man named Carlos who had been working double shifts all week, stood frozen, staring at the shattered remains of a serving platter. "I'm sorry, I can't. His voice cracked. "My daughter's sick. I need to go home." The head caterer's face softened. "Carlos, go. Family first." But Miranda had appeared in the doorway, her presence filling the kitchen like cold water. "Absolutely not. Her voice could have cut glass. We're already short-staffed. We have 200 guests expecting a 5-star experience, and I will not... Miss Colburn, what he needs is to finish his shift." Miranda's eyes swept the kitchen and landed on me. "You, Elena, since you're already proving slow with trays, make yourself useful. Full dish duty. Every plate, every glass, spotless before it returns to the floor." The kitchen went silent. Even the ovens seemed to hold their breath. I looked at Carlos, saw the exhaustion and worry etched into his young face, and made my choice. "Go," I told him quietly. "I've got this." His eyes filled with grateful tears. "Thank you." Miranda's smile was sharp and satisfied. "How noble. Now move. We have a dinner service to execute." I returned through the industrial sink as Carlos slipped out the back door. The pile of dishes seemed to grow even as I watched. Plates crusted with fig compote and duck fat, wine glasses lipstick-stained and fingerprinted, silver utensils that needed hand polishing. I rolled up my sleeves further and began. Steam rose around me, fogging my vision. My hands moved mechanically. Scrub, rinse, dry, stack. The water turned my skin red, then pink, then raw. Soap crept under my nails. My back ached from hunching over the sink. This was my kitchen, my home, and I was being treated like I'd treated people 1,000 times without realizing it. Every restaurant server I'd been impatient with, every housekeeper I'd thanked absently without really seeing, every person whose labor made my comfort possible. The realization hit harder than the hot water. "Isn't this cute?" Catherine's voice, suddenly close. I looked up to find her standing in the kitchen doorway, a glass of wine in hand, her expression one of amused contempt. A woman who thinks she's too good for real work, learning her place. Several guests had gathered behind her, drawn by the spectacle. I met her gaze steadily, my hands still submerged in suds. "I've never been too good for honest work." Her laugh was like breaking glass. "Honest work? Darling, this isn't honest work. This is consequence. This is what happens when you don't have talent, connections, or ambition." She gestured with her wine glass, sloshing slightly. "You'll never see a night like this again. The wealth, the beauty, the importance. People like you should be grateful we even let you witness it." The kitchen staff had gone rigid, eyes carefully averted. No one would defend me. No one could afford to. I looked down at my reflection in the dishwater, distorted, wavering, barely recognizable. Then back at Catherine, at Miranda smirking behind her, at the cluster of guests treating my humiliation like dinner theater. "You'd be surprised," I said quietly, each word deliberate. "Who's grateful tonight?" Something in my tone made Catherine's smile falter, but before she could respond, a commotion erupted in the foyer. Car doors, voices, the head of security speaking urgently into his radio. One of the waiters burst through the kitchen doors, his eyes wide. He spotted me at the sink and froze, then leaned in close enough to whisper, "The host's car just arrived. Mr. Hart's here." My heart stopped, then restarted at double speed.
Liam. I looked down at my hands, raw, pruned, soap slick, at my uniform, damp and clinging from steam and splashes, at my reflection in the steel refrigerator door, the invisible woman I'd made myself into. The performance was about to end, but the real show, that was just beginning. I dried my hands slowly, deliberately, feeling the rough towel against my damaged skin. Through the service window, I could see guests straightening, conversations shifting, everyone reorienting toward the unseen presence in the foyer. Miranda swept past me without a glance, already moving to greet Liam with her practiced charm. I exhaled, long, slow, steadying. Then I followed her into the ballroom, ready to reclaim everything they thought I'd never had.
Liam entered the ballroom like he always did. Quietly confident, warm without being effusive, commanding attention simply by being genuine. He wore a classic black tuxedo, his tie slightly loosened from the day's meetings, and his eyes scanned the crowd with the practiced ease of someone who'd learned to navigate rooms full of strangers. "Mr. Hart," Miranda materialized at his side, her smile bright and practiced. "We're so honored you could make it. The evening has been absolutely spectacular. Thank you for your work, Miranda." His handshake was polite but brief. Though, I should clarify, this is as much Elena's event as mine. She's been instrumental in planning tonight. He stepped toward the microphone at the front of the room, and the ballroom fell into attentive silence. The quartet ceased playing. Conversations died mid-sentence. "Good evening, everyone." His voice carried easily. No need for volume, just presence. "Thank you for gathering in our home tonight to support such vital work. The Silvercrest Foundation's commitment to sustainable housing has the potential to transform lives, and your generosity makes that possible." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Before we continue with dinner service, I wanted to acknowledge someone very special. Liam's expression softened. "My wife, Elena, has poured her heart into making tonight meaningful. She personally selected the auction items, coordinated with the housing projects we'll be supporting, and insisted that tonight be about substance, not just spectacle." He paused, looking around. "But I haven't seen her since I arrived. Has anyone seen Elena?" The room shifted uncomfortably. Guests exchanged glances. A few looked toward Miranda. "She's dealing with some staff issues, I believe," Miranda offered, her voice tight. "Nothing to worry about." "Staff issues?" Liam's brow furrowed. That's when I stepped through the kitchen doors. The ballroom froze, a photograph capturing the exact moment before everything shattered. I walked forward slowly, still wearing the black server's uniform, my apron tied and spotted with soap stains and water splashes. My hands were raw and red. I looked exactly like what I'd been treated as. Invisible help. The silence was deafening. Liam's eyes found mine across the room. I watched confusion flicker across his face, then understanding, then something darker. A fury so controlled that it was almost invisible. Almost. "Elena?" His voice was careful, measured. Miranda's face drained of color. "She's... Mr. Hart, she's one of the servers, I thought. My wife." Liam said, each word precise as a scalpel. "My wife is not one of the servers. I reached behind my back and untied the apron, letting it fall to my side. Actually, tonight I was. The room erupted in whispers. I walked forward until I stood beside Liam, facing the crowd of people who dismissed me, mocked me, ordered me around like I was less than human. They looked different now, smaller somehow. Their expensive clothes unable to hide their shrinking postures. I wanted to see something tonight, I said, my voice calm, but carrying to every corner of the room. I wanted to see something tonight. I wanted to see how people who claim to care about the less fortunate actually treat those they perceive as beneath them. Catherine Vale's wineglass trembled in her hand.
Liam's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting me speak. You talked about compassion while snapping your fingers at servers. You toasted to helping the poor while mocking the people cleaning your plates. You congratulated yourselves on your philanthropy while treating human beings like furniture. I looked at Miranda, then Catherine, then swept my gaze across the room. You measure someone's worth by whether they can advance your social standing. That's not charity, that's performance. I didn't know, Miranda started. That's the problem. You didn't know, so you felt entitled to be cruel. But kindness shouldn't require recognition. Respect shouldn't depend on someone's title or tax bracket. I took a breath. You don't measure class by the clothes on someone's back, but by the kindness in their voice. And tonight, this room failed that test spectacularly. The shame was palpable now. Guests couldn't meet my eyes, couldn't meet each other's eyes. Liam stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of finality. Effective immediately, Hart Innovations is severing its partnership with the Silvercrest Foundation. Our funding, all $2.3 million pledged for this year, will be redirected to organizations that actually practice the values they preach. Gasps erupted. Someone's glass shattered on the marble floor. Mr. Hart, please. Miranda's voice cracked. We can discuss this, surely. There's nothing to discuss, Liam said. You ordered my wife to wash dishes in her own home because you assumed she was powerless to refuse. That tells me everything I need to know about your character and this foundation's. Catherine stood frozen, her earlier smugness replaced by horror as she realized her cruelty had just been broadcast to everyone who mattered in her social world. Miranda's carefully constructed empire, built on connections, donations, and the appearance of compassion, crumbled in real time. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Liam took my hand, his touch gentle, despite the anger I felt radiating from him. Come on, he said quietly. Let's go. We walked together toward the grand staircase, past the guests, past Miranda's devastated expression, past Catherine's pale face. The crowd parted silently. As we reached the stairs, I paused and looked back one last time. They were all watching now, finally seeing me. Enjoy the rest of your evening, I said. Then I walked up the stairs of my own home, finally visible, finally free. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows, softer than I remembered. Or perhaps I was just seeing everything differently now. My phone had been buzzing since dawn. Headlines crawled across every news outlet. Billionaire's wife goes undercover at charity gala, exposes elite hypocrisy. Hart Innovations pulls millions after wife mistreated at her own event. The invisible woman who owned everything. The photos were striking. Side-by-side images of me from magazine covers beside grainy phone footage someone had captured of me in my server's uniform, hands submerged in dishwater. The contrast told the story better than any words could. Miranda Coburn had resigned by midnight. The Silvercrest Foundation's board issued a statement promising comprehensive internal review of organizational culture. Catherine Vale's social media had gone silent, her carefully curated world of influence collapsing under the weight of her own words, now endlessly shared and dissected. But among the media frenzy, something unexpected arrived. Letters. Real letters, handwritten on expensive stationery delivered by courier throughout the morning. Apologies mostly. Some sincere, some clearly crafted by PR teams. A few made excuses, but a handful, a precious handful, contained genuine reflection. I didn't realize how I sounded until I saw myself through your eyes, one woman wrote. I'm ashamed, and I'm trying to be better. Those letters I kept. You're smiling at hate mail? Liam appeared in the doorway, 2 coffee mugs in hand, his hair still damp from the shower. Not hate mail, awakening mail. I accepted the coffee gratefully, though I'm sure the actual hate mail will arrive by noon. He settled into the chair across from me, his expression mixing pride and exasperation. You always did have a dramatic streak. Most people would just fire someone. You orchestrate a full-scale social expose. Sometimes people need a mirror before they can see themselves. Words don't work when privilege is the water you swim in. You don't notice it until someone makes you feel what it's like to drown. Liam's smile faded into something more serious. What you did took courage, but it also took privilege. You could walk away from that sink anytime. Not everyone can. I know. The coffee was suddenly too hot, too bitter. That's what kept me there, even when it hurt. The difference between me and Carlos, the dishwasher who had to leave for his sick daughter, was choice. He couldn't walk away without consequences. I could. That's privilege. I looked up at Liam. And if I can use that privilege to make people think twice before treating someone as invisible, then maybe the performance was worth it. It wasn't a performance. Not by the end. I saw your hands, Elena. That was real. It was. My hands still bore the marks, dry, slightly cracked, a small burn on my thumb I didn't remember getting. Battle scars from a war most people never acknowledged existed. I need to do something, I said suddenly. An hour later, I gathered the staff who'd worked the gala in the dining room, the same room where they'd served people who hadn't seen them as human. I want to thank you. I began looking at each face, not just for working that night, but for your grace under impossible circumstances. You showed more class than anyone wearing diamonds. I handed each person an envelope. Inside, a bonus equal to a month's salary and a handwritten letter acknowledging their professionalism and humanity. The head caterer's eyes filled with tears. Mrs. Hart, you didn't have to. I did. Because you matter. Your work matters. And you should never be made to feel otherwise. As they filed out, thanking me with voices thick with emotion, the house felt different, lighter, as if something heavy I hadn't realized we'd been carrying had finally been set down. That afternoon, I found myself back in the kitchen, not because I had to be there, but because I needed to. Needed to stand in the space where I'd been broken down and rebuilt in the span of a few hours. The industrial sinks gleamed, empty and peaceful.
Morning light poured through the windows, turning the stainless steel soft and golden. The room, that had felt like a battlefield last night, now felt sacred, a place where something important had been revealed. I placed my hands on the counter, feeling the cool marble beneath my palms. Last night, I stood here unseen. Today I stand seen, and so does everyone like me. The words hung in the air, a promise and a prayer. I thought about the woman at the coffee shop who'd inspired Liam's kindness years ago, the single mothers cleaning houses, including my own mother, the servers and dishwashers and housekeepers who kept the world turning while the world pretended not to notice. Every person whose labor made comfort possible for others, they weren't invisible. They never had been. We just chosen not to see them. And now, because of soap-stained hands and a borrowed uniform and one night of uncomfortable truth, maybe a few more people would look, really look, and see the human being behind the service, the dignity within the work, the worth that exists independent of wealth or status or social standing. Kindness is not a performance. It's not something you turn on when cameras are watching or donors are present. It's a reflection of who we are when no one important or everyone we consider unimportant is watching. Treat everyone with respect, not because of what they can do for you, but because humanity has no hierarchy. Because the person serving your coffee or cleaning your home or washing your dishes is someone's daughter, someone's mother, someone's whole world. Because you never know who's standing quietly behind the apron. But more than that, because even if they're exactly who they appear to be, they still deserve your kindness. I stood in my kitchen, in my home, in the life I'd built with a man who'd always understood this truth. And for the first time in years, I felt completely, authentically seen. Not as a billionaire's wife, not as a society figure or a former waitress or an undercover activist. Just as Elena. Just as human. Just enough.